Every week, headlines flash about central banks injecting new money into the economy, whether it's through quantitative easing, stimulus packages, or government spending. We are told this money is neutral, designed to stimulate the entire system equally, like pouring water uniformly across a vast field. But what if this assumption is fundamentally wrong? What if every time a new dollar, euro, or pound is created, it doesn't spread evenly, but instead follows specific channels, enriching a few at the expense of everyone else? This is a hidden story of the Cantillon Effect, a powerful economic concept named after the 18th century Irish-French economist Richard Cantillon. It is the inescapable law that dictates that new money is not neutral. It is a systemic mechanism for wealth redistribution. We will trace this concept from its origins in the silver mines of 16th century Spain to the financial chaos of the Mississippi bubble in France, and finally, to the modern phenomenon of asset price inflation that quietly fuels today's widening wealth gap. Understanding the Cantillon effect is the key to knowing why you feel richer when the stock market rises, yet your everyday costs keep climbing faster than your wages. The origin, silver, Spain, and structural change. Richard Cantillon first articulated this principle in his seminal work, Essai sur la nature du commerce en général, published posthumously in 1755. But the mechanism he described was already playing out centuries earlier with the massive influx of precious metals from the New World into Europe. Imagine the silver arriving in Seville. The new money didn't magically appear in everyone's wallet simultaneously. It flowed through localized channels. First, to the Spanish crown, then to port owners, the merchants who transported the metals, and the military. These initial recipients, the people closest to the spigot, received the new money before prices had adjusted. With their increased purchasing power, these wealthy groups changed their spending habits. Cantillon speculated they would consume more luxury items, such as meat and fine wine, driving up the prices of those specific goods first. Only much later, after these people had spent their money, did the inflationary wave gradually ripple out to the rest of the economy, eventually reaching the farmers, laborers, and those whose wages were sticky and slow to rise. The consequence was not just inflation, it was structural economic change. Since the prices of meat and wine rose faster than bread and beer, farmers were incentivized to shift their land use from growing grain to raising cattle and vineyards. In effect, the flow of new money dictated which industries thrived and which lagged behind, fundamentally changing the structure of the economy and creating new winners and losers. The test case, John Law and the Mississippi bubble. Cantillon himself experienced the effect firsthand during one of history's most notorious financial collapses, the Mississippi bubble in France in the 1720s. Richard Cantillon was deeply involved with the system of John Law, a Scottish banker who convinced the French crown to adopt a paper currency system backed by the promise of immense wealth from the French Louisiana Territory. Law's system involved printing vast amounts of new money, which he injected directly into his scheme, the Mississippi Company. Cantillon, being an early participant and financier, was one of the first in line to receive the newly created money. Unlike many who were caught in the subsequent collapse, Cantillon used his position near the monetary spigot to profit heavily. He left Paris, converting his paper wealth into hard assets and debt repaid in stable currencies in Amsterdam and London. When Law's scheme inevitably collapsed, those who received the money last. The general public who bought the Mississippi Company stock at the peak using inflated paper money were devastated. The ultimate irony? Many of Cantillon's debtors, financially ruined by the bubble, blamed him directly, demonstrating the powerful resentment directed at the first recipients of the new money. The Cantillon effect proved to be a self-reinforcing mechanism of early enrichment and later retribution. The modern trap, asset price inflation. If the 18th century monetary spigot was the mint or the royal bank, the modern spigot is the central bank, specifically the mechanism of quantitative easing, QE. QE involves the central bank injecting massive amounts of newly created money directly into the financial system, primarily by purchasing bonds and other assets from large commercial banks and financial institutions. These institutions and their wealthy clients are the first recipients. When they receive this new money, they don't immediately spend on consumer goods like bread or meat. They spend on financial assets, such as stocks, bonds, and real estate. This immediate influx of capital drives up the prices of these assets, a phenomenon known as asset price inflation. This process creates a widening gap between two inflation rates. Asset price inflation. Good for the rich, the prices of stocks, bonds, and luxury real estate skyrocket, disproportionately benefiting the wealthy, who own most of these assets. Consumer price inflation. Bad for the poor/middle class only after the new money has flowed to the financial system and into the hands of traders and executives does it begin to influence the price of everyday goods and services, CPI. By the time the money reaches the average worker in the form of slightly higher wages, the cost of living is already inflated, eroding their purchasing power. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle that increases economic disparity. Those closest to the money benefit most, making investments before price adjustments, while those at the end of the chain are left to deal with the resulting inflated costs. The unspoken warning. The Cantillon Effect reveals a dark reality about modern monetary policy. It is not a neutral tool for economic management. It is a guaranteed, if unintentional, mechanism for systematic wealth transfer. The structural changes seen in 16th century Spain, where land use shifted to benefit the newly enriched, find their parallel in modern times, where capital flows are channeled into financial engineering rather than productive industry, benefiting those with access to cheap credit. The warning for today's citizen is clear. When you hear about trillions in stimulus or new QE programs, understand that this money is not coming to you first. It is going to financial institutions and the already wealthy who own the assets that the central bank is buying. This explains the persistent paradox of a booming stock market coexisting with stagnant wages and soaring housing costs. 3 lessons from the Cantillon trap. The location of money matters more than the quantity. The point of injection of new money determines who gains and who loses. In the modern era, being far from the central bank's injection point means bearing the cost of inflation without reaping the initial benefits of asset appreciation. Asset ownership is your defense. To escape the trap of bearing the inflation cost, the modern citizen must shift from being a mere holder of labor or cash savings to a holder of productive assets, the items that receive the money flow first, e.g., real estate, equities. Monetary policy is distributional policy. Central banks, often claiming political neutrality, are executing profound distributional policy. Their actions systematically benefit asset owners at the expense of wage earners and savers, demanding a critical public debate over who the financial system is truly designed to serve. The Cantillon trap shows that financial history is less about complex formulas and more about who gets the money first. The question for every investor today is simple. Are you positioned at the beginning of the flow, or are you waiting at the end for the inevitable inflationary tide to reach you? If this exploration of Richard Cantillon's insight gave you a new perspective on today's economy, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments below how you believe the modern Cantillon effect has personally impacted your generation's ability to build wealth.